I got a question for all of you. And that is, where is Tiny Fauci? Is he hiding in a drawer somewhere at the CDC? Has he fallen into a thimble and is now yelling out that everyone still needs to be masking up? Why aren't you all wearing masks? I'm just wondering how it's possible that suddenly they announced this for the State of the Union, that all these mask mandates are going away, and little Fauci, the mask fundamentalist, disappears somewhere. I mean, I know he's easy to lose in a crowd, but where did he go, Clay?
He's been on every media outlet except this one for basically 2 straight years. He'll go talk to anybody's podcast. I mean, this guy is the number one guest. He was on basically every morning show, it feels like, for the last 2 years. You haven't been able to escape him. Every time I look up, he's on CNN or MSNBC telling you about how you're all going to die and how important it is for you to, go get your 8th booster. And all of a sudden, in what is fairly significant CDC activity starting on Friday, ending masking, and effectively last night, State of the Union, nobody's wearing a mask. Every state, even now including Hawaii, California, Washington, and Oregon, states that have lost their minds, New York City, all these places doing away with their mask mandates. I saw where Philadelphia is letting their kids now not have to wear masks anymore. All these places. And Fauci isn't to be heard from at all. And again, I don't know who ordered the code red. I don't know who in the Biden White House walked in and said, guys, our polling numbers are absolutely atrocious. But somebody did, and that code red got ordered, and they basically kicked Fauci right out of any media appearances. And they since then have totally pivoted in every direction, Buck. It is like light switch, you're sitting in darkness and then they suddenly flip the light on and they're pretending, oh yeah, well, there's the science changed, but it didn't. They just recognized that they were getting crushed and they're terrified and they're running scared and they changed everything overnight.
I think we were the first people to start to ask this question, Buck. I didn't see very many other people in media pointing out that as the CDC made the decision to change the rules surrounding masking and vaccine mandates and everything else, suddenly Fauci disappeared in the lead up to the State of the Union address. Fauci, who would do every media outlet on the planet, you would see him multiple times a week on CNN, MSNBC, quoted all the time, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. Suddenly he's gone. And you'll remember, if you listen to this program, that we have been offering for Dr. Fauci to come on to this program forever. And the Fauchmeister responded and said, hey, I'm too busy to come on the Clay and Buck Show, which is, not to brag or draw attention to ourselves, but the biggest radio show in the country. And we've been wondering, where is Fauci?
Is he hiding in the couch cushions over at the MSNBC green room? Has Fauci fallen into a desk drawer at the NIH and some late-night janitor closed it up with them yelling in there, put on your mask, what's going on? I can't see, it's dark in here.
So Dr. Fauci has been doing podcasts and YouTube shows with virtually no audience. In fact, Dr. Fauci this week recently appeared, and by the way, credit to, was it Jordan Schachtel, I believe, who tracked this all down. You can read about it with him. You can read about it at Outkick. One of my guys wrote about it. He appeared on an online streaming show called Woke AF, and that's woke as I'm sure you can imagine what that might stand for. There is virtually no audience. He also then has been going on local public access television shows in the Washington, D.C. area. This is embarrassing. I mean, he is so unbelievably desperate to be able to be heard. And by the way, he's continuing to rail against the unvaccinated. He's continuing to argue for, stop me if you've heard this before, stringent restrictions surrounding COVID. But my goodness, I got to be honest with you, Buck. I love that even the Biden administration has finally said to Fauci, you're out of here, bud. They basically have canceled him.
So let's look at what this really is telling us all. Fauci was a political tool all along, and he identified that he's an NPR listening, CNN watching, New York Times reading Lib, and wanted that side of this debate to be his side of it. He never once told Democrats, whether the Biden administration or any Democrat governor, something they did not want to hear on COVID, which is remarkable when you think about it, given how much wrongness there was from the establishment, the health establishment about COVID and the apparatus of COVID control. And now you see, I'm just wondering if Fauci at some point is going to show up and you're going to see him, just in like some local basement doing off Broadway theater shows like, my name is Fauci. I'm here to tell you to mask up, to continue to mask. And there'll be 7 people in the audience, 3 of whom are drunk and don't even know where they are. I mean, this guy is addicted to attention. He was all along. There were a few early indicators for why I knew, and Clay, you knew mask. I don't know, when did you decide, before I get into this, when did you say to yourself, oh, this guy Fauci's a problem? For me, by May of 2020, I was like, Fauci's a big problem.
Yeah, May, and I think I'm like a lot of people out there listening, Buck, because we're about to come up on two-year anniversary of 15 days to stop the spread. I was willing. I didn't think it was really smart, but I was willing in March of 2020. I said, okay, maybe this 15 days thing will work, but I wanted things to be back to normal really quickly. And by, I think May is a good example. Maybe even late April. You were like, hey, by Easter, we have to be back to normal. I got to give you credit because I was not an Easter guy. But soon after Easter of 20, I said, oh, my God, this is crazy. Yeah. And I got fired up about the fact that kids weren't going back to school. And by May, I was done with the Fauchmeister.
There was a debate. I think some folks will remember it now. Within the Trump administration, and Trump was thinking about calling for Easter of 2020. So that would have been early April, essentially a full reopen. Yep. We're not doing this. And I was public about it. I said, we got to push through. I know that there are going to be problems. I know there's going to be more COVID, but we cannot change our society for this. And man, did I get dragged online for that one. Of course, turned out it was all true and correct. And, no one ever writes and says, I'm sorry about all the death threats I wrote you. That was a little hysterical of me.
I do like the criticism of you when people said you were Thanos. That's actually pretty funny.
That was a little bit entertaining. But I will say,
for people out there who don't have kids, Thanos, spoiler alert, snaps his fingers and half the people die. And so the idea that Buck was, I actually give credit to that criticism and think it's a little bit funny. But yeah. you were at the early vanguard.
I was there. Jesse Kelly was there. There were a few of us who were just like, this is total madness. There should not be. We cannot do this more than 2 weeks to slow we cannot do this beyond the 2 weeks to slow the spread. And I mean, I mentioned this a second ago. Because I actually am trying to troll tweet Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary. Yeah, I'm going after these people now. I want answers, and you have Buttigieg. I think we have that clip somewhere, right? He was asked. If we don't have it, we can get it. He was asked, well, you know what? Before we get to that one, I've been saying for a while that this is a mental health issue for people now who continue to wear masks outside. Clay, there were pro-mask demonstrators singing. Now, this is not going to be pleasant for your ears, folks, but you need to hear the lunacy. Play clip 15, pro-mask demonstrators in New York.
One's mask for friends. It's not about you. Also not hard to do. Just because we're tired doesn't mean it's over. Mandate masks. That's our ask. Masks for seniors. Masks for kids. It's not about you. Also not like the flu, just because we're tired doesn't mean it's over. Mandate masks, that's our ask.
Just because we're tired doesn't mean it's over. These people need serious counseling. There's something wrong with them.
Regulate us harder is basically what they are screaming at the government. And to your point, we're talking about March 18th, in theory, would be the day when the federal mask mandate, the CDC, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, put in place for airplane travel, for subways, everything else, buses. He was asked whether the CDC will let him drop the mask mandate on planes and trains. And it's not going to surprise you that our esteemed Mayor Pete, who at least to his credit is finally back off of his paternity leave,
he didn't have a good answer here. Play cut 19.
Planes, trains. Are we going to be wearing masks forever?
There hasn't been any change to the guidance that's currently in effect. And you can imagine why. If you think about the guidance that thankfully has come out that's allowed us in a lot of different places, in Washington, for example, where the transmission is considered low, to move into kind of a new stage with regard to these masks. You got a plane, you might have 100 different people from 99 different counties, some of which are low, some of which are high, some of which are in between. And so the strategy is a little bit different. But the question about how long it's going to be required, that's going to continue to be based on the findings of the CDC.
So he sounds like a blathering moron, but I would try to give him the credit of he's just too much of a coward to speak the truth. I don't think he's so stupid that the Secretary of Transportation thinks what he just said makes a damn bit of sense. I don't think he's that dumb, because he does sound like a true moron, and I think he's just a dishonest little political coward, which, I mean, that's been true for a long time. Clay, the CDC does not make law. This is the whole time.
Yes.
This has been the game. We're waiting for the guidance. The Biden administration could say, you know what? No, we're done. They could do that tomorrow. This thing of, we're just letting the experts make the decisions. And then we go to the experts and we say, hey, why are you making these stupid decisions? They say, we're not making the decisions. The government's making the decisions. The White House making the decisions. This is evading accountability from totalitarians who are idiots. That's what they're doing.
Buck, the CDC just changed the definition of what a significant outbreak was, which is how they managed to end the mask mandate. There are more people dying with COVID today than were dying with COVID a year ago on the state. So the idea that the CDC is in some way relying on science, they could snap their fingers tomorrow and say, you know what? We've changed the metrics by which we analyze whether people need to wear masks on airplanes. They don't exist anymore. And by the way, I thought of when I was done with Fauci. I remember my answer now. Had to go back in time into my brain, pull it out. My birthday's April 6th, Buck. So in 2020, on April 6th, in the middle of still the early part of the lockdown in many ways, somebody knocked on the door in my house. Went to the door, opened it, and I had cupcakes sent to my house. Nice birthday gift from someone. And the person was delivering the cupcakes. And I said, wait a minute. Cupcakes are considered an essential business? Because at that point in time, so many non-essential businesses, which that's one of the many flaws which existed. All businesses are essential if you're employed by them, or you own them, or you rely on them. I said, wait a minute. The cupcake business is allowed to stay open with no restrictions, and they're allowed to go door to door and deliver cupcakes? Now, look, I love cupcakes.
Clay loves cupcakes.
I'm
So
not
do I.
coming down.
We're not coming down on cupcakes.
If Big Cupcake is listening right now, I'm not trying to cancel you, Big Cupcake, all right? If Gigi's Cupcakes wants to come in and spend $1 million with Clay and Buck, we'd be ecstatic to have you. But it ain't essential that you get cupcakes delivered to your house. And so at that point, I went out on my show and I just said, I'm done with essential and non-essential businesses because there's no way to justify this. So at that point in time, I was basically done with Fauci. That was early in April. I remember that specific moment.
It was all so arbitrary. Every aspect of the lockdowns, the mitigation, not only was it useless, it was arbitrary. It was actually worse than you. I take that back. It's not correct to say that the lockdowns and the mandates were useless. They were hurtful. They were harmful. They were counterproductive. They made things worse. It's not just that they didn't. Yeah, masks don't work very well, but you had to wear masks all the time, and people now have speech impediment issues, and people have learning loss, and people have skin problems, and all kinds of additional health issues that came from this that have been suppressed up to this point. But I'll tell you real quick, because I know we got to keep moving along here, Clay. For me, as soon as I found, first of all, the Fauci, don't wear a mask in public, it's silly. And then a few weeks later, it's like, of course you should wear a mask. I knew, like, this guy is he's a bureaucrat. He's going with the winds of politics right now. That's all he's doing. But when I found out that he was calling Chris Cuomo at home every night when he had COVID to check in on him for like 10 days or 7 days or whatever the quarantine period was, it's like there are thousands and thousands of seniors dying all over the country. We're getting overwhelmed by all these different ideas about what we should do and shouldn't do with the pandemic. You're going to call weightlifter, 45-year-old Cuomo at
Yeah.
home every day to check on him because he was a little quisling suck-up to power. And I knew that. As soon as I found that out, I was like, ugh. But we're looking for Fauci. He might have fallen into a thimble somewhere, or a little bucket or something. I don't know, a little tiny Fauci. He's missing in action right now.
I'm still furious over the distinction between essential and non-essential businesses because I started a small business. I was fortunate I was able to continue to run everything that we did at Outkick through the COVID mess. I had employees. We had to make, make the payments and budget and everything else. But for those people who lost their business because of that idiot tyrant, and I have to be careful what words that I use, I still feel sick to my stomach that we did that to small business owners who put their entire heart and soul into their business. A lot of them, tons of them listening to us right now, forced to shut down because we listen to people like Fauci. And I don't think I'm ever going to get over it. And, Buck, that's why I'm so fired up about November of this year. It has to be a reckoning. It has to be an ass-kicking of all ass-kickings.